Hello, lovely. Settle in, your story is waiting.
The wedding was set for 3 o'clock. By 1:30, Cecily Mordaunt was already dressed. The gown was an exquisite ivory satin with a fitted bodice. The skirt fell in a long, full sweep behind her. She was 24 years old. She was the sole heir to Ravenswood Hall, and in approximately 90 minutes, she was going to marry Alistair Finch in the church at the end of the drive. Below, the carriages had been arriving since noon. The lawn was bright and cold, the grounds of Ravenswood dressed for the occasion, the hedgerows trimmed and the gravel raked, and the whole estate wearing its best face for the afternoon. The knock at the door was soft. Lady Honoria entered alone, already closing the door behind her, her expression arranged into something tender and ceremonial. "The others are gathering downstairs," she said, "but I wanted a moment with you first. Just us." She crossed the room and took Cecily's hands in both of her. "Come, there's something I want to show you from the tower balcony before we go down. The grounds look extraordinary from up there today. Come see it with me." "Just for a moment." Cecily smiled. She let herself be led. The tower staircase was narrow. Honoria climbed ahead of her, one hand trailing the wall, and pushed open the balcony door into the sharp, bright cold. The view was everything she had promised. Cecily stepped forward to the railing. She did not hear Honoria move behind her. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. 2 hands, flat against her back. A single decisive push. The railing's edge caught her hip as she went over, spinning her sideways, and then nothing beneath her feet. Nothing at all. And the sky and the stone, and the terrible rushing sound of the air, and the ground coming up faster than anything she had ever experienced in her life. She did not scream. There was no time. This is the story of Cecily Mordaunt, uniquely created for you. Let me know where you are listening from. Subscribe to Lovely History if you haven't already. Raphael Mercer, Duke of Caldwell, had been standing on the south lawn when it happened. He had stepped outside to escape the particular brand of cheerful noise that fills a house before a wedding. The laughter too loud, the conversations too animated, everyone performing their delight at being present for something significant. He was not antisocial by nature, but he had his limits, and his limits had been reached somewhere between the third retelling of how Alistair Finch had proposed and the second glass of champagne he hadn't wanted. He knew the Mordaunts in the way that neighbouring families in the English countryside know each other, well enough to be invited to the wedding, not well enough to be inside the family's grief when things went wrong. He had met Cecily Mordaunt twice. Once at a dinner the previous autumn, where she had said something precise and quietly devastating about the county's drainage legislation that had made him laugh before he could stop himself. Once at a church service in December, briefly, in passing. He had thought about her more than twice warranted. He had not examined this too carefully. He was looking at the church spire beyond the tree line, his champagne glass held loosely at his side, when movement above him caught his eye. The tower balcony, 2 figures. And then 1 figure, and then his mind refused the information for a full half-second before his body accepted it and was already moving. 1 figure falling. She hit the sloped roof of the stone outbuilding at an angle that slowed her, then rolled into the dense box hedge along the east wall. He was running before the sound reached him. Behind him, from inside the house, he could hear the continued noise of the reception. No one else had seen. No one was at the right window. The south lawn in that moment contained only him. He reached the hedge in seconds. She was there, partially visible through the broken branches, her ivory dress stark against the dark leaves. He pushed through, ignoring the tearing at his coat and hands, and crouched beside her. She was breathing, shallow and ragged, but breathing. He looked up at the tower balcony. Lady Honoria stood at the railing, looking down. For one moment their eyes met across the distance. And in that moment Raphael understood everything he needed to understand. Her expression was not horror. It was not the face of a woman who had just watched her stepdaughter fall by accident. It was the face of a woman calculating. She stepped back from the railing and disappeared inside. Raphael looked at Cecily. He looked at the house, where the sounds of celebration continued undisturbed. He thought, with a rapidity that surprised even himself, through the available options. If he raised the alarm, Honoria would have her story ready before he finished speaking. An accident, a terrible accident. And Cecily, if she survived, if she was able to speak, would be vulnerable, bedridden, in a house controlled by the woman who had just pushed her off a tower. He did not know the details of what lay behind this. He did not need to. He had seen what he had seen. He made his decision. He gathered her as carefully as he could, one arm beneath her shoulders, one beneath her knees, moving slowly to avoid what he suspected were broken ribs from the sound of her breathing. She made a small, involuntary sound, but did not wake. He carried her along the base of the east wall, away from the house's main windows, to where his horse was tied at the far gate. He had ridden over, rather than taking the carriage, a habit born of preferring his own company on the road. He secured her in front of him, with his coat wrapped around her against the February cold. He rode at a careful, steady pace toward Caldwell House. Behind him, at Ravenswood Hall, Lady Honoria was already telling her story. Lady Honoria Mordaunt was back inside Ravenswood Hall within 4 minutes of the push. She had composed herself on the tower stairs. 3 deep breaths, hands smoothed against her skirts, expressions assembled into the particular configuration of shock and devastation that the next hour would reveal. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. It was, she had long understood, her most reliable talent. She appeared in the doorway of the main drawing room, where the wedding guests were gathered in their pre-ceremony clusters. Champagne, conversation, the pleasant anticipatory hum of people waiting for something celebratory to begin. She stood in the doorway long enough to be noticed. Then she let her composure crack, visibly, in the way of a woman trying very hard to hold herself together and failing. The room went quiet in stages. "There has been an accident," she said. Her voice broke precisely where it needed to. "Cecily, on the tower balcony, she slipped." What followed was the particular chaos of a large group of people receiving terrible news in a confined space. Voices, movement, someone's champagne glass set down too hard and shattering on the hearthstone. Several guests moved toward the door. Others reached for one another. A woman near the window made a sound that was not quite a scream and not quite a sob, but something between the two. Alistair Finch pushed through the room before Honoria had finished speaking. She caught his arm. "Don't!" she said, and her voice was genuinely raw now, not from grief, but from the effort of maintaining precision under pressure. The drop. It was the full height of the tower. "There is nothing to be done, Alistair. There is nothing." He looked at her. His face had gone entirely white. She held his gaze and let him see her grief, which was a performance, and her certainty, which was not. He stopped. He stood in the middle of the drawing room, with the sounds of the house rearranging itself around a tragedy, and he stopped. Gerald Morrow appeared at Honoria's shoulder 6 minutes later. She had sent a footman for him the moment she came inside. He took in the room with one swift, assessing look and moved smoothly to her side. "The body," he said, very low, beneath the noise of the room. "The east wall, the box hedge below the outbuilding." She did not look at him. "By now," she left the sentence unfinished. Morrow nodded once and moved away to speak quietly to 2 of the male guests, men of practical disposition, the kind who could be relied upon to manage the physical realities of a situation, while others were still processing the emotional ones. He returned within minutes, his expression confirming what she needed confirmed. There was no body. She absorbed this information without visible reaction. Only one explanation was possible. Someone had moved her. She catalogued the guests, the staff, and the arrivals she had observed from the tower. Someone had been on the south lawn. Someone had seen. She could not pursue this. Not now, not today. Not without drawing precisely the kind of attention that would unravel everything. The story was already in motion. She had to trust the story. "An accident," she told the magistrate, who arrived by 4 o'clock. Her grief was immaculate. She stepped too close to the railing. "I tried—" A pause. A hand pressed briefly to her mouth. "I tried to reach her, but it was too fast." The magistrate was kind. He was also, like most people confronted with a beautiful, devastated woman and a straightforward account of a terrible accident, entirely convinced. 15 miles away, on a road that ran between bare winter hedgerows, Raphael Mercer rode at the careful pace of a man managing something fragile. He had his coat wrapped around her and one arm steady at her back, and he felt, every few minutes, the shallow rise and fall of her breathing against him. Still there, still there. He did not let his attention waver from this. The February cold was serious, and getting more so as the afternoon light began to go. He spoke to her occasionally, low, even sentences about nothing in particular, the road, the distance remaining, the fact that Caldwell House had good fires and a competent housekeeper. He did not know if she could hear him. It seemed important to speak anyway. She made a sound once, small, involuntary, when the horse shifted its footing on a patch of frozen ground. He slowed immediately, adjusted his hold, and she went quiet again. He did not breathe normally for several seconds after. The gates of Caldwell House appeared in the failing light at 4:30. He had never been so relieved to see them. Mrs. Brent, Raphael's housekeeper, had been in his employ for 22 years and had weathered a considerable range of unexpected developments in that time. She opened the door of Caldwell House to find her employer on horseback with an unconscious woman in a wedding dress, and responded with the practicality that had always been her defining quality. "Guest room," she said. "The one with the south light. She'll need a physician. I'll send Thomas to Dr. Hale in the village. He's discreet." She was already moving. "What happened?" "She fell from a height. Ribs, I think. Her wrist." He paused. "No one can know she's here, Mrs. Brent." She looked at him steadily for a moment. Then she nodded and asked nothing further, which was one of the many reasons he had kept her employed for 22 years. Cecily Mordaunt slept for most of 3 days. Dr. Hale confirmed 3 fractured ribs, a broken wrist, severe bruising across her back and left hip, and a concussion of moderate severity. He set the wrist, strapped the ribs, left instructions, and accepted Raphael's explanation of a riding accident with the incurious professionalism of a country doctor who has learned that the details offered to him are rarely the details that matter. Raphael sat outside her door on the first night, not because it was necessary, Mrs. Brent was more than capable, but because he found he could not quite bring himself to be in a different part of the house. He told himself this was reasonable vigilance. He did not examine it further. When Cecily finally woke properly, on the afternoon of the 3rd day, she was quiet for a long time. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the window, at the light, at the unfamiliar room with its plain, good furniture and its south-facing warmth. Then she turned her head carefully and found Raphael sitting in the chair beside the bed, with a book open in his lap that he had not been reading. "Where am I?" she said. "Caldwell House, 15 miles from Ravenswood." He set the book aside. "You're safe." She looked at him. He could see her assembling the available information. The room, the pain in her ribs, the cast on her wrist, his face. "You were on the lawn," she said. "Yes." "You saw her?" "Yes." She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, there was something in them that he recognized. Not grief yet, not quite, but the thing that comes just before it. The moment of full understanding arriving. "What story is she telling?" Cecily asked. He told her. The accident, the irrecoverable body, the devastated household. He watched her face move through the information with a precision that told him she was not simply absorbing it, but analyzing it, asking herself the questions underneath the story, looking for the architecture of the lie. "Gerald Morrow," she said finally, "her uncle, her co-conspirator, or I am considerably less observant than I thought." She paused. "I had noticed discrepancies in the accounts. I hadn't yet confronted anyone." Another pause, quieter. "They couldn't wait. Can you tell me about the accounts?" She looked at him with an expression he would come to know well, the look of a woman deciding whether a person is worth trusting, applying rapid and rigorous assessment. "Yes," she said, "but not today." "No," he agreed, "not today." He brought her tea, which she accepted. He did not fill the silence with reassurances she hadn't asked for, which she noticed. She drank her tea and looked out the south window at the winter garden, and did not speak again for some time, and he did not require her to. By the 2nd week, Cecily was sitting up. By the 3rd, she was at the small writing desk in her room with paper and ink that Raphael had provided without being asked, making notes in a hand that was slower than usual due to the cast, but no less precise. She had asked him, in that 2nd week, for whatever documents he could obtain relating to the Ravenswood estate. Public records, legal filings, anything accessible without raising suspicion. He had contacts in London and in the county solicitor's office, and he used them with discretion. What arrived, piece by piece over the following weeks, confirmed what Cecily had begun to suspect from her memory of the account book. Gerald Morrow had been forging transfer documents for at least 4 years. The amounts were careful, never large enough to be immediately obvious, always routed through subsidiary accounts that required a specific knowledge of the estate structure to follow. It was, she told Raphael one evening, with a kind of grim professional admiration, actually quite sophisticated. It was also unambiguously criminal, and she had, by the end of March, documented enough of it to constitute a comprehensive legal case. The hidden will clause took longer to find. It was Raphael who located it, through a London barrister he trusted, who obtained a copy of the full Mordaunt will from the probate registry. He brought it to Cecily on a Tuesday afternoon and set it on the desk without preamble, open to the relevant page. She read it twice. Then she set it down and sat very still for a moment. "If I die unmarried before my 25th birthday," she said, not a question, "everything passes to Lady Honoria as a surviving family member, with Morrow named executor. My birthday is in November." She looked at the calendar on the wall. They had until November. "The wedding would have made the clause void the moment I signed the register." She was quiet for a moment. "They were never going to let me sign the register." Raphael said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. "How long have you known?" she asked. "I received it this morning." She nodded. She looked at the document again. Then she folded it carefully, placed it with the other evidence she had assembled, and said, "We need a signed witness statement from you about what you saw on the balcony." "Already written," he said. "Whenever you want it." She looked at him then, the full, direct look that he had been on the receiving end of many times in the past weeks, and still found slightly unnerving in its completeness, as though she were reading not just his words, but the material underneath them. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could have raised the alarm on the lawn. You could have handed me to someone else. You had no obligation to any of this." He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "No," he said, "but I saw what I saw, and I am not the kind of man who walks away from what he has seen." She held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she turned back to her papers. "Good, because we have a great deal left to do." Spring came to Caldwell House in the way it always did in this part of the country, gradually and then suddenly, the gardens going from bare to abundant in what felt like a fortnight. Cecily's cast came off in April. Her ribs stopped hurting consistently sometime in May. She began taking long walks in the evenings, initially alone, and then, without either of them quite deciding this, with Raphael. They talked on those walks the way people talk when they have already spent months working closely together and have exhausted the obvious topics, which is to say, they talked about everything: the estate, the legal case they were building, books, the particular quality of the light at this time of year, their respective childhoods, offered in pieces, without sentimentality, his father, who had been a difficult man, her father, who had been a good one, and whose absence was still a daily fact of her life. She did not talk about Alistair. Raphael did not ask. He was aware, in a way he had stopped trying to suppress sometime in March, that he loved her. It had happened without drama or announcement, a quiet accumulation, like water finding its level. He was aware, equally, that she was still wearing the ghost of another life, that she had been days away from marrying someone else when the tower happened, that whatever she felt for Raphael Mercer, and he suspected, on his best days, that she felt something, it was growing in soil that had not yet finished grieving. He was patient. It was, perhaps, his best quality. The letter arrived in September, forwarded through 3 layers of intermediary to protect the address. It was from a contact of Raphael's in London, a brief, factual note, the kind designed to convey information without lingering on it. He read it in the morning room before Cecily came down. Then he folded it and waited. She appeared at 8:30, as she always did, with the focused energy of a woman who had already been thinking for an hour. She looked at his face and stopped. "What is it?" He handed her the letter. She read it standing up. He watched her face with the attention of a man who has learned to read a particular person's expressions over the course of 8 months in close proximity. He saw the information land. He saw her process it with the rapidity that was simply how her mind worked. And then he saw something else, something quieter, moving through her like a tide going out. Alistair Finch was engaged to Miss Eleanor Vane of Derbyshire. The announcement had appeared in the Times 3 days prior. Cecily set the letter on the table. She looked out the window at the September garden, at the late roses still holding on against the turning season. She was very still. I'll leave you to… Raphael began. No. She said it quietly, without looking away from the window. Stay. He stayed. He sat in the chair across the room and did not speak and did not leave, and she stood at the window for a long time, and outside the garden did what gardens do in September, continued, indifferent and beautiful, letting things end. He thought I was dead, she said eventually. He grieved. He moved forward. A pause. I cannot fault him for it. No, Raphael said. It simply closes something. She turned from the window. Her eyes were dry. Her expression was the composed, clear-eyed look of a woman who has felt something completely and is now on the other side of it. I think I had been keeping something open that I should have closed months ago. It's easier, somehow, knowing it's finished. She looked at him across the room. He looked back. There was a long moment that neither of them filled. Then she said, practically, we should review the Morrow documents this afternoon. I think we're close to having everything we need. Yes, he said. I think we are. But something had shifted in the room, and they both knew it, and neither of them said so. And that was precisely right. They planned the return with the same methodical thoroughness they had brought to everything else. Raphael's barrister in London, a precise, unflappable man named Alderton, who had initially received the case with professional skepticism and was now, having reviewed the evidence, professionally electrified, coordinated with the county magistrate. The forgery documentation was submitted through official channels. The witness statement, signed and witnessed, was filed. The will was formally examined and the hidden clause legally confirmed, along with the argument that an attempt on Cecily's life by a named beneficiary of that clause constituted grounds for its complete invalidation. Cecily wrote the legal summary herself. Alderton, reading it, told Raphael it was the clearest document he had received from a client in 30 years of practice. Raphael relayed this. Cecily received it without visible pleasure, which meant she was pleased. They agreed on a Tuesday in November, 2 weeks before her 25th birthday, which eliminated any remaining ambiguity about the will clause. The magistrate's men would be in position at Ravenswood by 10 in the morning. Cecily and Raphael would arrive at past. The night before, she found him in the library at Caldwell, the room where most of their work had been done, where the evidence had been assembled and argued over and refined across the better part of a year. She came in without knocking, which she had stopped doing sometime in the summer. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Yes." She sat across from him. "I want to say something before tomorrow." He waited. "Whatever happens at Ravenswood, however it goes, I want you to know that this year has been…" She stopped, tried again, with the precision she always brought to things that mattered. "You did not have to do any of this. You had no obligation to me. What you did, on the lawn and after, was…" A pause. "I don't have the right word for it. I'm not sure there is one. You don't need to. I know I don't need to. I want to." She looked at him steadily. "You are the best person I have ever known, Raphael. I wanted to say that before tomorrow, in case tomorrow is complicated and I don't get the chance." The library was very quiet. "Tomorrow will be complicated," he said, "but there will be time after." She held his gaze. "Yes," she said, "there will." She left him there, and he sat for a long time in the room where they had worked, surrounded by the ordered files of a case they had built together from nothing, and felt the particular quality of a night before something changes, the last hours of a chapter, distinct and significant and almost unbearably full. The morning was cold and clear, the kind of November day that feels scoured and honest, no softness in the light, everything sharp and visible. Cecily sat in the carriage and watched the familiar countryside pass with the expression she wore when she was thinking about several things at once and had decided to think about all of them quietly. Raphael sat across from her. He said nothing. She did not require him to. The gates of Ravenswood Hall appeared at 10:30. The carriage turned up the drive and the house came into view, stone and familiar, and exactly as she had left it, 9 months ago, in a wedding dress. The grounds were winter bare. Smoke rose from several chimneys. From outside, it looked entirely normal. She stepped out of the carriage and stood on the gravel and looked at her house for a moment. Then she walked to the front door and opened it herself, without knocking, because it was her door. The entrance hall was empty. From somewhere in the house came the sound of movement, of ordinary morning activity. A maid appeared at the far end of the corridor, saw Cecily, and went completely still, "Please tell Lady Honoria that Miss Mordaunt is home," Cecily said pleasantly, "and ask Mr. Morrow if he is in the house to come to the drawing room." The maid stared. Then she turned and went quickly down the corridor. Lady Honoria appeared in the drawing room doorway 2 minutes later. She was dressed, composed, beautiful as always, and the expression that crossed her face when she saw Cecily was the most honest thing Cecily had ever seen her produce. It was not guilt, precisely. It was the expression of a calculation going violently wrong. "Cecily," she said. Her voice was admirably steady. "Good morning, Honoria," Cecily said. "Please sit down." Gerald Morrow arrived 4 minutes after that, summoned by a message that had not specified why. He came through the door with the preoccupied air of a man interrupted mid-task and stopped as though he had walked into a wall. Raphael closed the drawing-room door behind him. What followed was not dramatic in the way that drawing-room confrontations are dramatic in novels. No shouting, no tears, no theatrical confession. It was considerably more effective than that. Cecily sat at the writing table she had used since childhood and presented the evidence with the systematic, unhurried clarity of someone who has been preparing for this moment for 9 months and is not going to waste it on emotion. The forged documents, laid out in order, the account records showing the transfers, the will and its clause, Raphael's signed witness statement, which she placed on the table and left face up, and finally, a letter from Alderton confirming that the county magistrate's office was currently in the process of executing the relevant warrants. Honoria said nothing throughout. She sat with her hands in her lap and her face arranged and looked at the documents as they appeared, and Cecily watched her understand, one piece at a time, that there was nothing left to argue. Gerald Morrow, who was a less composed person than his co-conspirator, attempted 3 sentences of denial and stopped when Cecily looked at him. "The magistrate's men are outside," she said. "They have been there since 10 o'clock. A knock at the drawing-room door confirmed this with efficient timing. Raphael opened it. 2 officers entered, and what remained of the morning was largely administrative. Ravenswood cleared quickly once the formal proceedings began. It was remarkable, Cecily thought, how fast a house empties when the people who have been occupying it wrongly are removed. By afternoon, Honoria and Morrow were gone, and the house was quiet in a way it had not been since her father was alive. A genuine quiet, not the held-breath quiet of a household managed by fear. She walked through it alone in the late afternoon. The library, which Morrow had clearly been using as his office, and which smelled of his tobacco and his disorder. The drawing room, which still held the ghost of the morning's proceedings. Her father's study, which no one had touched. She could tell by the particular stillness of it, the dust on the surfaces, the sense of a room that had been avoided. She sat at his desk. She put her hands flat on the surface and looked at the window, and let herself feel, properly, and without management, what it meant to be here. The grief came first, for her father, for the morning in February, for the version of her life that had been interrupted. She let it come. She had learned, in 9 months at Caldwell, that grief doesn't diminish if you reason with it. It only diminishes if you let it move through. Then, underneath the grief, something steadier, something that felt like ground. This was hers. It had always been hers. And she had proven, in a year she had not chosen and would not have designed, that she was entirely capable of fighting for it. She heard Raphael in the entrance hall below, his voice, low, speaking to someone, managing something practical, as he had managed practical things consistently for 9 months without being asked to. She listened to the sound of it for a moment. Then she went downstairs. He was in the hall, speaking with Mrs. Alderton, the housekeeper who had run Ravenswood since before Cecily was born, and who had greeted Cecily's return that morning with an expression of combined relief and vindication that had been extremely satisfying. He finished the conversation and turned as Cecily reached the bottom of the stairs. "The accounts will need a full audit. Alderton's office can provide someone. I'll do it myself." She paused. "But not today. No, not today." She looked at him in the entrance hall of her family's house on a November afternoon, the light going golden through the tall windows, the house quiet around them. She thought about what she had said to him the night before. She thought about the letter in September, and the walk afterward that neither of them had turned back early. She thought about 8 months of evenings in the Caldwell library and the specific quality of a silence shared with someone who understands you. "Stay for dinner," she said. It was not, on its surface, a significant sentence. But they both understood that it was not really about dinner, and the look he gave her confirmed it. Yes, he said simply. He told her properly in December. He had been at Ravenswood frequently in the weeks since the return, helping manage the formal proceedings, reviewing documents with Alderton's man, simply present in the way he had been present for the better part of a year. He was good at being present without demanding anything from it, which was one of the things she had come to rely on without quite acknowledging that she was relying on it. She had known for some time what she felt. She had known since September, if she was being precise, and possibly before that if she was being honest, which she generally preferred to be. She had simply been waiting, not for certainty. She was already certain, but for the right quality of moment. She had learned, in the past year, not to rush things that deserved to unfold at their own pace. He found her in the study one evening in December, her father's study, which she had made her own in the weeks since the return, clearing Morrow's disorder and restoring it to something that felt like the room she remembered. The accounts were spread across the desk. The audit was nearly complete. Outside, the first proper snow of winter was falling on the Ravenswood grounds, soft and steady, covering the garden and the drive and the tower balcony in a clean white silence. Raphael stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at her, at the desk and the lamp and the snow beyond the window, and the particular quality of her attention when she was absorbed in something she cared about. "I have been in love with you since approximately March," he said. "I thought you should know." Cecily set down her pen. She looked at him. "I know," she said. "I have been waiting for you to say so." He crossed the room. He sat in the chair across from her, the same configuration as 100 evenings at Caldwell, the same desk between them, the same lamp, the same quality of quiet, except that everything was different, and they both knew it. "I don't want to ask you to give anything up," he said. "Not this house, not the work, not any of it. I want whatever you want. I want to be part of it, if you'll have me." "That," Cecily said, "is either the most practical declaration of love in history or the most romantic. I haven't decided which." "Which would you prefer?" "Both," she said, simultaneously. He smiled. She had always liked his smile. It was rare enough to mean something. "Then both," he said. They were married the following April, at Ravenswood Hall, in the church at the end of the drive that had been waiting for her since February of the previous year. It was a small wedding by the standards of their respective positions. 50 guests, a simple ceremony, a breakfast in the Ravenswood dining room that ran long because the conversation was good. Cecily wore a gown of deep ivory, not the February dress which she had quietly given away, but something new and entirely chosen. Raphael watched her come up the aisle with an expression that several guests would later describe, independently of one another, as a man who cannot quite believe his own fortune and is not trying to hide it. Cecily, who did not believe in hiding things that were true, smiled at him the entire length of the aisle. They divided their time between Caldwell and Ravenswood in the years that followed, never fully settled in either, which suited them both. Cecily completed the estate audit and introduced a financial management system that reduced operating costs significantly and which Alderton's man described, in a letter to a colleague, as the most elegant accounting framework he had encountered in private estate management. She began advising 2 neighbouring families on similar matters. She was, by every practical measure, excellent at what she did. Raphael took his seat in the Lords more seriously than he had previously, driven largely by Cecily's brisk assessment of what he was and was not doing with his available influence, which he received well and acted on. The tower balcony at Ravenswood was eventually rebuilt, the railing replaced, the stonework repaired, the access door rehung on proper hinges. Cecily stood on it for the first time in the summer of their first year of marriage, on a warm July afternoon with the grounds spread out below, exactly as Honoria had promised they would be. Raphael stood beside her. She looked at the view for a long moment. Then she looked at him. "She was right about one thing," Cecily said. "The grounds do look extraordinary from up here." Raphael looked at the grounds, then at her. "Yes," he said, "they do." She took his hand, and they stood there in the summer light, and below them, Ravenswood Hall continued in the unhurried, ordinary way of a house that is properly, finally, home. Thank you for listening to Cecily and Raphael's story. If it moved you, please subscribe to Lovely History. New stories, always original, always yours. I'll see you in the next one.